Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Redistricting has caused an uproar at the Salisbury City Council recently, setting the stage for potentially redrawing political power in the crossroads of Delmarva. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. It's been some time since the last major change has occurred in the size and shape of the council districts. Back in the 1980s, under a court order, a minority-majority district was carved out for better representation of the African-American community. That still left a separate district for the remaining 4 at-large seats. But that could change. The town of 30,000 has seen its minority community grow to over 40% of the population over the years. To address this issue, one proposal adopted by the City Council would have included another representative from the minority-majority district while keeping the remaining at-large district intact. But the Council has returned to the issue and is expected to hold a public hearing on a plan presented by Mayor Jim Ironton to divide the city up into 5 separate council districts. Take a look at the impact of such a major change. Our in-studio guests are Council Vice President Laura Mitchell. She is currently seeking an at-large seat on the Wacomico County Council, and Councilmember Shani Shields, who represents the minority-majority district created in the 1980s. Also, Councilmember Terry Cohen, who has expressed reservations about the separate districts, could not make it this morning, but is set to discuss the issues next Friday on Delmarva Today. So, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with you, Laura. Where are we in terms of in terms of making a decision about just the shape of the districts? Are we going to have 5 as opposed to the 2 and so on? Where were we in this process first?
Well, there was a decision made based on the last census that would affect the 2013 election, and it did. And what that did was expand the minority district a bit so that it was more representative of our population, which is required. But we didn't change the number of representatives per district in that plan. But as a part of that charter change, they also made changes to what map would be used for the 2015. In that, there would be 2 representatives elected from the minority district and 3 from the rest of the city. That does change the number of representatives from each district, so that needed to go to court because we're under a consent decree from 1987. And that was never sent to the court. So at this point, we're looking to see, we know we have to send it to the court. We have to send it soon so that it can be approved and completed, that whole process done before the 2015 elections. However, the discussion ensued. The mayor asked us to reconsider the 5-district map that he had proposed when this came up the first time. And the council was willing to do that. And we have, I think, a majority that favors, at this point, it looks like a majority that favors the 5 single-member districts, which meets the requirements for the numbers on as far as splits in population, as does the map that's proposed to be used right now. But this one is a little more fair because in this map, using the 5 single-member districts, everyone in the city gets 2 votes every time. They will get 1 vote for a council member in their district and 1 vote for the mayor. Versus the other map where the minority district would vote for 2 council members and the mayor, and everyone else would vote for 3 council members and the mayor. So it's about equality and it's about fairness.
By the way, why was it that the original proposal, the 2 and 2, why didn't that go to the judge?
That's a really good question. I asked a number of times. It was under the leadership of the council majority. It was up to them to send it. They adopted it. They needed to send it. There's been some comments about the mayor not sending it, but it wasn't the mayor's responsibility. It was the city attorney's responsibility to send it. He was under the direction and direct supervision of council president and vice president, and none of them sent it, despite a number of requests by myself in particular to speed that up. When are we going to do this? Because I knew Ms. Shields and I did not like that map, did not approve of that map. We felt that the 5 districts was more fair, as did the ACLU and the NAACP. And we had an attorney that was ready to help us pro bono stand with the NAACP and the ACLU and ask the court not to approve that map, but to approve the 5-district map instead. So I was very on top of when they were going to send that, and they never did.
So would it be fair to say that the consideration of what looks like might be going with the 5-district as opposed to the expanded minority district with the 2 reps, that this represents basically a shift in the council in terms of its composition, that the old council previously with Debbie Campbell had favored this, and now with Jake Day coming on, the sort of sentiment has shifted. Is that a fair assessment of what's happened here?
Well, when you have a 5-person council, it really only takes one to swing it one or the other. If you've got 2 on each side and there's one seat that changes, whichever way their vote goes, changes it. And it just seems that we have a majority. I don't want to speak for Jake or anyone else, but it seems that we have a majority that is in favor of what I perceive to be more fair 5-district map. It also gives people a little more buy-in, I think, a little more ownership. If you can walk to your representatives home and talk to them, you know them, they know the issues in your community better. Someone living in the South End doesn't understand necessarily the issues of traffic and other things that someone in the North End is dealing with, and vice versa. The people in the North End might not understand the issues of college students walking through your yard and the parties and that kind of thing that you hear about. Whatever those issues are, they're different. They're different no matter where you are in the city. So breaking it up into 5 districts, I think, is the best thing to do.
Shani, so what is your sense about this entire process that's unfolded? I'm sure you have a few things. I mean, obviously you didn't like the one that was basically expanded with 2 reps for the minority. Go ahead.
I never understood why we had 2 districts. I wasn't part of. I knew about the lawsuit in the 80s, but I wasn't in the political world then. And what I saw, and I always questioned, why didn't we have more than 2 districts? I understand why they formed the minority district, but things change also. And I think when I sit on the council, I try to look at what is fair for the city of Salisbury and the citizens. And to me, what is fair is having more than 2 districts. 5 is because you have, right now, the way we had it before, you had one neighborhood actually controlling the political life of the city of Salisbury. And we went through all this public hearings, we went through all this, and my feelings was they were going to keep it the same. So why have these public hearings if we're going to keep it the same that you originally had? They increased it a little bit over in the Church Street area and the President Streets, like the Princeton Homes area. But they still kept it at the 2 districts. And I feel that you shouldn't let one neighborhood control the city, because that's what could happen. Now, I feel that at our last, when we start talking about this, and I have to bring this up and make it public,
Sure.
They talk about renters and homeowners and how many renters live in these districts and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's appropriate to bring that into the decision that we make on this districting. They look at who financed your campaign, and I will make it public. Yes, property owners did give me the majority of my money, but I also look at that as they do rent to minorities, because majority of minorities are renters. You have to have an open dialogue with the property owners. Not saying you always agree with them, but if I have a problem or a tenant has a problem, I can pick up the phone and talk to the property owner and try to iron out what the concern is before I pick up the telephone and call neighborhood services. I try to help them help themselves. Like if I see a drug traffic, I call them. If I see a door hanging, I call the owner of the property. And I have that relationship. And business owners and property owners pay the bulk of the taxes in the city of Salisbury. And I think I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. And I think candidates who want to be in politics, they should not be ashamed or fearful of who donates to them. Long as it's not drug money and mafia money. That's what I've said. Long as legal money, you should not be afraid of who donates to your campaign, because that's part of the process. And I think that someone on the north side of Salisbury, they have issues. I live on the west side of Salisbury. There's two different neighborhoods. I don't know what, there's two different neighborhoods. Some of the people that even are in office may not even know what's going on in my neighborhood. They may not even ride through my neighborhood. And I think that from an example that the previous president, Mr. Louise Smith, did, she lived in a neighborhood, affluent neighborhood, but she took time and went to Church Street and did several cleanup campaigns, and I appreciated that, because she saw the needs of those people, and she made friendships with one of the first habitat owners over there, and she's still working with this particular lady because they built that friendship and trust among both of them. And I like to see that happen. If you're going to say you're representing the whole city because you got two districts, I can't believe they do. I really can't believe it. And I think there's 5 districts, as Laura said. We supported the 5 districts, and I continue to support it. I will not ever vote for 2 districts again. I think our city is growing. If the town of Fruitland and Princess Anne, those little small towns, have districts, why can't we, the largest city on the Eastern Shore, why can't we have 5 districts?
Let me bring in there, because one of the things that strikes me is that there is this discussion about whether or not you can represent, for instance, other parts of the city. I mean, and I know that Terry Cohen, who does not necessarily favor the 5 districts, she says that, she says, I don't represent where I live. I get calls all over the city, including the other district. That's what she says. Now, first of all, what's your reaction to that? And second of all, it hasn't always been this way in terms of people. There have been variety, for instance, of people on the city council from the at-large. I mean, I recall Rachel Polk, for example.
Yes, she did.
So she also represented, and she was African American. So, I mean, you don't think that's possible to represent it?
Well, I think that
go ahead.
I can't prove that people call, but if someone called me from District 2, I would let the people that represent District 2 know. I think we were doing the Only Road issue, and the man called me. You let people know the concerns coming from somebody else's district. Now, part of Camden Avenue is in District 1. So if anyone called her Smith Street, the college student problem, they may have called her with that. I do not have the college student parties like Camden Avenue and other neighborhoods. I don't have that problem. But if someone called me and said they had a party in District 2, I would make it known that I received a call. And I would also ask the person, is it okay to share that name? Now, I did have someone come to me concerning a problem they had, and I let everyone know. I can't say it because it's a personnel matter, but I shared it with the whole council. The concern.
So are you saying that
if someone called from my district?
Now, have you had Terry Cohen say get a call and say then refer it to you? Have you had any?
She would let me know. She can handle the problem. I'm not telling her not to handle it.
But she has let you know.
No,
she has not.
I have never.
You have not gotten any calls.
No, I haven't gotten any calls from her at all. And I feel that if it's a concern, if it's safety, housing, a particular landlord or something, they say I'm in their pocket, so why can't she say, well, call one of your buddies and tell them this is going on. I've never ever, I always hear about phone calls, and then they say they're afraid to give their names because they're afraid of intimidation, etc., etc. So that's the excuses we've had over the years. But all I'm saying is I feel that if something's going on in District 1, she should at least make me aware of the problem. Not saying she shouldn't solve it, but at least make me aware of the problem. I get calls from the county all the time. All the time. And what I do, I refer them to people, and then Cherie and I talk. You know, see, and that's how it should be. So you know what's going on in your name, because you I'm one person, and you can't be everywhere, you know. So I appreciate if she would let me know, or anybody. Right. But if they're representing the city, so they can take care of the problem, but just let me know if it's really especially a serious problem.
Laura, I'm turning to you. How much of this really is about landlords, the Salisbury, I think it's the Area Property Owners Association? Because I know that there was certainly Debbie Campbell, who is now gone from the council, but certainly had strong ties to Terry Cohen and Tim Spees. That she shared she was very concerned about rentals. She was very involved with the 4 to 2 movement, which wanted to restrict the number of unrelated people who could be in a rented apartment. How much of this is about landlords and rentals, do you think?
From my perspective, zero. I don't think it has anything to do with it.
But what about the politics of this? Because it seems to me that there's part of that going. I mean, if you live in a particular neighborhood and you're concerned about rentals,
right? They're
not. And I know that there's been sharp criticism, certainly from Cohen, but other folks on the council, from her, I guess, her side of the majority of SAPOA and of the rental issue.
Well, I didn't think that was going to be a part of the issue until we were at the meeting, and one council member asked for an overlay of the district maps with owner-occupied properties versus rental properties, and that made me take notice, because I don't know what that has to do with it. We have somewhere close to 70% rental properties in the city of Salisbury, so that is a majority. If you want to look at who should have the voices on the council, then we should have 70% representation of renters and 30% from homeowners, if you want to do it by that. But the Constitution doesn't allow us to determine whether you can vote based on ownership, home or property ownership. It doesn't allow that. And so, and the property owners who don't live here can no longer vote in the city. That went away years ago. But there seems to be a force there that wants to hold on to that. And the accusation was thrown out that breaking up into smaller districts would allow these landlords to come in and buy the votes of these representatives, because they're smaller districts. It would be easier to buy. First of all, our contribution limit is $250. If you come that cheap, then you shouldn't be on council to begin with. So that's a pretty low threshold. So I really don't think that when you see the numbers of what people raise for a city council race, it's really not that important, and it's not that big of an influence. It takes money to run a campaign. That's the way it is. As Ms. Shields said, that's the way our system works. I'd rather it didn't, but it does. So you look to the groups that support you for what you're going to do. Now, whether you're supporting them wholeheartedly, blindly, whatever they say goes, and that's the way you vote, you're probably not going to stay on council very long, because that's for any constituency. That's not just for landlords, because you're not open-minded enough and you're not considering the facts. We go through a great deliberation on pretty much everything we look at. Some things are fairly simple, but there have been a couple of votes I didn't know how I was going to vote till it came out of my mouth at the table, because it was 6 one, half a dozen another, and it was a very tough choice. There have been 3 votes like that, and I can tell you what they are. And none of them had to do with property issues, really. So it's not, for me, it's not a part of it. With the 70% rentals, they are spread all over the city. There are only 1 or 2 neighborhoods that don't allow it at all, rentals in their neighborhood. So they're really the minority. So everyone has issues in terms of renter versus owner-occupied. Some people have a bigger issue with it, I think maybe personally, than actual problems that they could point to. So for me, it's not an issue. In terms of the district, representing a district versus the citywide, I forget which district I'm from, because I have to think about
You'll figure it
beyond
out.
the election, it doesn't. No, I mean even now, when someone asks me, "Oh, you're in District 2, right?"
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah. I'm in District 2 because it beyond the election point, it really doesn't matter to us. But it's not about what matters to us; it's about what matters to the citizens of Salisbury and the voters. If we can break that down into smaller groups and give them more ownership and more buy-in of who they're electing, that someone from their neighborhood understands the issues they're facing that city council can impact. There are a lot that they face that we don't have any impact on, any ability to impact. But if they feel that way, then I would hope we would be able to see a higher than 17% turnout in an election, that we might see more candidates. The other option that we have facing us by breaking it up into smaller districts, we may be able to eliminate the primary, because you might only have 2 or 3 candidates from each district and 2 or 3 candidates for mayor. And then, so then it's not such a long list. If you're picking for 3 seats and you've got 4 people that run for each seat, that's too long a list for a general election. But if it's 2 or 3 from each district and 2 or 3 for a mayor, that's not so bad. You could eliminate the primary, and that's about $26,000 that we could save there each election every 4 years, and then have just the general, all the names on the ballot at the general. So there are a lot of advantages to doing it this way. And one other thing that I will mention, when we looked at the maps and the numbers, and they gave us a map that showed minority populations versus majority populations. Now, also keep in mind that this goes by the Voting Rights Act,
right,
and the only minority that's considered is African American. They don't consider, we have much greater than 40% if you add in the Latino,
right,
the Haitians, the Asians, and all the other
various groups,
various groups that we have. So just talking about African American, we're over 40%, or just about 40%. But they couldn't say, unlike maybe early years or different years, they're all right here. This is where is your majority district. I'm sorry, minority majority district.
Yeah.
Yes, this gets a little crazy.
I know.
And so we just draw the line around here, and here's the majority. It wasn't like that. They're very dispersed throughout the state. I mean, the state, throughout the city. There are pockets here, pockets there, pockets here, but mostly there's a great deal of integration throughout our city, and so that makes it really hard to say, okay, these are the 2 areas that are the minority districts. So having the 5 districts, there will be 2 that are in the predominantly minority districts, but there will be plenty of opportunities in the other districts, and even greater opportunity for minorities to get elected. We've had 1 elected from the majority district.
That's right.
Ms. Polk, but mostly they've come from the minority district. But this would make it even broader opportunity.
Let me ask you before I leave politics. One of the things that strikes me is that Mayor Jim Ironton came in very tough on rent, on the landlords. I mean, he proposed some real legislation that Sapole was really not happy about, to say the least. And now here we find a situation where he's proposing 5 districts, and there is this fear, certainly on the part of, say, Ms. Cohen and Mr. Spies, that they may have too much influence. Now, these 2 people were applauded, as I recall it, Jim's ascension to the mayorship. It seems to me like that old alliance, whatever it is, between Jim Ironton on the one hand and the former majority on the other, has sort of all broken apart. Is that a correct reading, Laura?
I think so. I think when you come into office, you come in with a perspective of what you think things are and what you think you'll be able to do. And you find out quickly that you're not able to affect all the change that you think you could, or that it's not as easy as you would like for it to be. And you start to realize that the only way you're really going to get anything done is by bringing everybody to the table to sit down and discuss it and find out everyone's perspective. Because I know I don't have all the answers, and I'm smart enough to know that and say, hey, let's go find the people that do. And I think that Mayor Ironton has made that transition, and in terms of the election districts, doesn't see this as a renter versus owner-occupied issue either, as we've said. So I think that's kind of the 2 pieces of it, is that it's really not an issue about owner-occupied versus rental, and a certain realization that even issues that are predominantly to do with rentals, you have to have people at the table that can help you find a working solution. We can pass legislation to say this is the way it is, But if all you're going to do is spend a bunch of money in court fighting it because no one will adhere to it because it's unreasonable or undoable, then what have you gained?
Shani, I want to ask you, so do you think that the African American community has been well represented, at least the way it has been, or do you think that in the past that, at least in previous councils, that there has been there's a minority representative and then there's like the four others? I mean, I've heard that, certainly reaching further and further and back. I think it's when Von Ziggers, when she first came on, people have observed that she would raise issues but the other four would then talk amongst themselves. What kind of response do you think you're getting as a representative of the minority community on the council in general? And yeah.
Well, I get positive response. They want me not to leave City of Salisbury. When I've been attending council meetings over 25 years under Paul Martin, and I used to go in and sit with Mayor Martin and discuss issues because I became active in the community when I moved back home through migratory labor, which dealt with the Haitian community especially. So I'm familiar with the Haitian community a great deal. I have a relationship with them. But I look at myself as a servant. I always say I'm a servant and not a politician because I'm here to serve. And I don't agree with Laura a lot.
Okay.
I'm not a lot, but we had a vote the other day.
Every once in a while. Okay.
I said I'm saying nay to everything. I said nay. I think to everything we all did the other. I said nay. And very seldom I do that.
Yeah.
And I'm more of a social justice type. When you call me politician or servant, I look at the social justice part of people that live in my community. Now, when they did the 4-2, I was definitely against that because people have to help one another. If you have a son that can't find a job, he's going to move in with you. Well, he's part of your family, but guess what? He's considered homeless if he's grown. If he's grown and he has no place to stay, you have a homeless child in your home. Federal government classifies you as homeless. I didn't know that. Then you had 3 veterans come who fought for their country, and they were going to Salisbury U, and because they were unrelated, they had 3 bedrooms, they had a nice house, they wanted to live in a nice neighborhood. Well, somebody called, and they were evicted. The landlord had to evict them. The landlord didn't want to evict them, but he had to, and here they fought for their country. I thought that was totally unfair. There should be exceptions. I don't believe that we should turn any more houses into like rooming houses or apartments. I do agree with that. However, when older people die, this is how this has happened. When older people die and leave these big homes, your children don't love the home like you did because they move away, probably financially, because they want to get a job or they move away. So when the parents die, what do? They sell it to a buyer. They sell it to a buyer because, they want to get rid of the house. So that's some of the problems, especially in my neighborhood. The people have moved away, lived away, taught from home, because that was a professional neighborhood where I live. But like my cousin Murray is 100 years old. Well, her children, they lived away. So they're not going to come back on Pearl Street and live. So these are the kind of examples, I think, why there was those big homes like in Camden. I grew up here all my life. So those big homes are like castles to me when I was a little girl. And I appreciate the decor. I appreciate the architecture. Don't get me wrong. But realistically, people, especially older people, not going to buy homes, or older people because of health have to move out. And their children live away. They're going to sell it to the highest person. Or then the foreclosures have driven even also rental people, because I lost my home through foreclosure. Now I'm a renter now in the city of Salisbury. So there's all kinds of circumstances that we have to look at when you make decisions. Why are these people living this way?
And you don't think that one of the previous majorities anyway really took that into account?
No, they don't. They're not social justice people. They want social service to handle that. I think we're social justice people too. I think we're a service type. Or yes, we legislate rules and regulations, but I also look at why are you going to legislate stuff that's going to make it harder for the low income person.
But by the way, have you as a district, do you think that you've gotten your share of the bacon, as it were? That is to say that there are a lot of political figures where you get investment into your into your community as a result of whether it's tax incentive or whatever it is. I mean, do you think you're getting your fair share?
Yes.
You do think? Okay.
Yes.
Despite the current majority the last majority.
And the reason why I'm going to say this, someone told me once, if you get a quarter of the pie this time, you might get a half a pie. And one of the first thing we did when I got on council, I talked about the flooding issue on Germania Circle. Well, now we've got in our budget $110,000 to do the study. It's been for years, these people since the 50s had this flooding issue. And then we got the River's Edge project, which I didn't agree with the total concept of artists, but I had compromised because the building got torn down and $20 million investment is coming on Fitzwater Street. There's the playground on Lake Street. Since I've been in inception, I was part of the design, and we got a new playground. So I think on that particular west side of the water, I think I've seen a lot of progress. When I came on, there was no drugstores. We've got we got 2 drugstores now on the west side. So we have a coffee shop. Dairy Queens come, Dunkin' Donuts come. So I think we're doing it for whatever reason. If it's to do the Nanticoke Road people, I don't care. It's in my district. So I think we have accomplished a lot.
But I did need to ask you briefly, because we need to get to the other segment. There was a recent Supreme Court decision on prayer in the public meetings, basically allowing Christian prayers, certainly by clergy. That's a part of the case in New York. Just recently, the Carroll County commissioners voted to go back to having Christian prayers recited. Actually, the commissioners recite them themselves as opposed to bringing in clergy. So just briefly, I know you guys had tussled with that. I think you now have a moment of silence. I'll start with you, Laura. Any sense about whether or not you guys are going to change your practice because of this court decision, or you guys are just going to leave it the way it is now?
I'm not sure. No one's brought that up yet as far as changing it. It may come up now.
Now that I mention it. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it may have come up before. And there were 2 parts to the motivation.
Right.
Mr. Spees brought it up in my first meeting with he and Ms. Cohen at Sage Diner before we took office, after the election, but before we took. And he wanted to get the bleep Lord's Prayer off the bleep agenda. And I didn't want it to just go away without discussion. So when it wasn't brought up, I said, okay, we need to talk about it if this is your plan to do it, because they had control of the agenda. But as that started to become a conversation, I was also approached by other people who had to come to our meeting for an approval for something who were not of Christian faith, and they were uncomfortable. They said that made them very uncomfortable, so they were glad that it was being discussed. And that took me by surprise, well, not surprised, but I mean, it made me take notice of how other people felt about it. If we wanted to take it off the agenda and have a public discussion about it, fine. But the other part of it was there were people all around us getting sued. I mean, we've seen Carroll County, as you mentioned. We've seen Sussex County, the county, and Indian River School District be sued. A number of others, but those are just recent ones. And that's a lot of money to fight that case, especially look at to go all the way to the Supreme Court. That's a whole lot of money. And I knew that we didn't have that. And with a simple solution of doing a moment of prayer where everybody could pray the way they wanted to, seemed like a logical solution. But if it comes up for discussion again, people want to talk about it, we have that ruling now, so the financial threat of being sued and going to court is in a different state now. It's in a different place. So now it's just a matter of what's best.
Shani, I want to turn to you.
Prayer means everything to me. And when they made the decision, I didn't agree with it. I had no one ever complain over the deal. Like I said, I've attended 23 years of council meetings. That subject never came up. No one seemed to have a problem with it. My phone. Sorry.
Yep, that's all right.
And I think that we need prayer now. If you see the situations that we have in our country, and you can do generic prayers. Maybe the Lord's Prayer. I'm not saying not do the Lord's Prayer, but there are inspirational things that you can say without offending someone, and I think we need to attempt to look at that. I did a little protest. I wouldn't come in during the beginning of the the meetings, and I said, well, I got to come. Yeah, I got to come in. I'm representing my people, not just not me.
Right.
But
so would you like to see it come up?
I like to see it come up.
Okay.
I like to see a way that we could do it where we incorporate everything. But remember, our country was founded on Christian faith. And we know we have different factions, but I think they should respect what we were founded on, and that's my whole concern. Yeah.
Okay. Just for clarification, we should mention that the previous practice was reciting the Lord's Prayer. That's what you had. And one of the things that did strike me was that in resuscitation of the Lord's Prayer, that actually there was a whole room filled of people who were actually reciting it, and I was wondering whether or not, as indeed Laura was mentioning, wondering how would people who didn't say, who were of other faiths, might react to that. But I'm no doubt we will get to that again.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've been talking to Council Vice President Laura Mitchell. She is currently seeking an at-large seat on the Wacomico County Council, and also Councilmember Shani Shields, who represents the minority-majority district that was created in the 1980s, and we appreciate you taking the time to stop by and talk with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for having us.
And up next, we're going to be talking about growing older on the Eastern Shore. This is Don Rush, and you're listening to Delmarva Today. On the Eastern Shore, a significant portion of the population is now above the age of 65. Wacomico County, for example, is 13.6%, while in Talbot County has reached 25%, and Dorchester County, it's 18%. Pam OBrien is with Partners in Care, which aims to use the deep resources of the older population to help this growing community. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, first of all, I want you to describe a little bit about your program and this whole concept you have of basically not just trying to get people from the outside to help you out, but that you get people who are associated with the organization to actually help each other out. Tell me a little bit, and how did you get started in all this?
Well, Partners in Care is a 501c3 privately owned nonprofit that started out in Anne Arundel County 20 years ago, and then Frederick 15 years ago, and we just kicked open the doors in Talbot County about 5 years ago. As you were mentioning, Talbot County does have one of the highest populations of people 65 and over here on the shore. Partners in Care, as you said, is neighbor helping neighbor. And one of the things that we focused on first here was transportation. Now, we do have the Delmarva buses, but there are some people that need a little extra. They need that arm-in-arm, door-to-door service. And through volunteers, we transport people from their door, arm in arm, to the doctors, to the grocery store, and various things that they need. One of the most important factors of Partners in Care is the way we connect people. Because a lot of times older people get stuck in their homes, and there's no way for them to connect in the normal way that they do. And in a sense, they become invisible because they're not at the soccer games, and they're not at the social events. They might get out to church on Sunday, but that's about it. And then they start to lose cognitive skills, depression sets in, and there's just a whole myriad of things that come along with this. So at Partners in Care, we believe everyone has some worth. Everyone has a gift or a talent to put into this bank of talent. So when we go out and we interview people who need rides, we interview them in their homes, and I'll say, what would you like to give back to the program? And it's like, I don't have anything. Well, do you knit? Oh, yes. Well, we have a boutique, and you can donate scarves or hats or things to our boutique. And that's a big portion of our funds comes from the boutique, which is actually in Pasadena, Maryland. And a lady who was 88 years old said, I have nothing to give back. And I said, well, you just told me that you took care of your husband with Alzheimer's for the last 10 years. Would you be willing to share tips and hints or just be a sounding board for someone who's going through this? She said, oh, well, sure. I said, you don't have to leave your home. They call you or you call them, and you can walk them through some things or tell them about your experiences and help them along. I said, that's a gift to them. That's a talent that you have. And a lot of people don't think of that as something to give back. So we're sort of like making stone soup. Remember the story where the old lady puts the stone in the pot because the village is starving, and someone says, oh, that's silly, and then but I have a few carrots. Someone else says, I have an onion. And the first thing you know, you're feeding the village. So we're keeping people included in the village, not with charity, but by parity. they can give back to their community and then therefore still feel a part of it. I've seen mobility improve. I've seen cognitive skills improve. I've seen depression go away. I said to one lady who I'd seen in church, I said, Miss Ann, where's your cane? You're not walking with your cane. She said, oh, I forgot it. And I said, for the last several years, I've seen you here barely able to get around in pain because of the arthritis in your knees. But we've been taking her to physical therapy, which helps to keep her knees moving. She's 92 years old. And she forgot her cane because she was no longer in the pain because somebody took 2 hours out of their day once a week to take her to physical therapy. So we have about 200 members in Talbot County now. We're tiptoeing into Caroline. We recently partnered with the Maryland Retired School Personnel Association of Caroline County, who came to me and said, we've got to have this. I said, well, we don't have any money for it. And we run on foundation grants and donations and fundraisers, but we don't have any money in Caroline County. They said, well, we'll volunteer, train us. So I'm starting to train people in Caroline County. And the Caroline County Commissioners recently asked me to speak to them because they wanted to know where we fit in with what they already had in place as far as the bus service and social services and that sort of thing. And I thought that was interesting because they're kind of, the council there's kind of taking the reins of saying, how are we going to get people moved around? Older people have a lot of doctor's appointments.
Oh, yes.
And they a lot of times they will not go to these appointments because they don't want to keep asking the neighbors. They don't want their children to take off time from work. To ride the bus, let's say from one rural town into Easton, where all the medical places are, you've got to catch the bus at a certain time, ride an hour. A 9-mile trip takes an hour because of all the stops they have to make. Then you have to change buses. And then you have to ride an hour around town to get to your doctor's office and wait to get back on the bus, ride another hour, get back on the bus and ride another hour or the other bus. And for some people, that's just physically exhausting. It's too much.
Let me ask you this. One of the things I ran across, there was a study apparently that was done by the University of Chicago, study of 2,000 people over the age of 50 for 6 months. And one of the things they found is that isolation, loneliness, can be twice as unhealthy for an older person as obesity. That's that kind of threat. They said that those who report being lonely had something like 14% higher risk of actually dying. And it's supposed to say, for instance, increased risk for since living in poverty is like 19%. How significant is that isolation issue and the loneliness? I mean, we work all of our lives and we have this sort of extended network of people that we're engaged with at the economic level, and we do have family. But it seems as if that begins to shrink rather rapidly the older we get, particularly as we start heading towards retirement. How significant is that? And how do you combat that?
We combat that by the one-on-one, arm-in-arm, door-to-door, and people establish relationships with their drivers. A lot of times the drivers are retired, and there's a wonderful book called What to Do When Your Career's Over But Your Life Isn't. And the gentleman lives in Annapolis. I can't recall his name right now. But anyway, these people are retired, but they may not want to play golf every day or go on the boat every day. So they want something to do. And they'll say, well, I have to go into Easton once a week anyway, so why don't I pick up this person that has requested a ride and take them with me, drop them at the doctor's, I can run my errands, and then pick them up. And what I see is bonds being formed, relationships. Because a lot of times here on the shore, as I've heard, a lot of the adult children don't live here. They have to go somewhere else to make a living.
Right.
And so mom and dad are here. And the kids are off in the city somewhere or another state. Mom and dad don't want them to know, the kids to know that they're depressed. They don't want them to know that they're not going to their doctor's appointments. Everything's fine. Yes, dear. I had a member who had some dementia. And the lady, actually, our volunteer reported to me that she was storing newspapers in her oven in her third-floor apartment. And became very concerned because this lady does have dementia. She asked if she needed to wear her shoes, and it was February. So I contacted the daughter out west who said, "Mother's your problem now." Click. I had another one say to me, "But I talk to my mother once a week and she sounds fine." I said, "Your mother knows all the answers to the same questions. And so she sounds like she's fine. So you need to come." And in some cases, I have had adult children. When I go in to sign a person up to be a member, I have an adult child come and be there. "How long have you lived at this address, Mrs. Smith?" "Oh, about a year." And the daughter saying in the background, 10. And things like that. And I said, "Well, what's your date of birth?" "Oh, I lie about my age." "Well, I won't tell anyone." "Well, I've lied so much I've forgotten." And it gives the adult children an opportunity to see a third party asking questions and the mother responding that way, or the father. The majority of our members are women. But we reconnect people. My volunteers will pick up the phone and say, "Hey, there's a snowstorm coming. Do you have all your meds? Do you need to get to the grocery store before it hits? You call me if the power goes out." I don't ask them to do that. That's not part of the program. But they form these bonds. Maybe their parents have passed away, and they kind of have a surrogate parent now. They have that nurturing ability to share with someone. And so it's money couldn't buy that.
In terms of people who have parents who are getting older, I mean, one of the things, I ran across, there was a whole list of things, to do and not to do. And one of the things they say, don't quit your job to take care of a parent, right, for the obvious reasons, I guess. But how should a young person, or relatively young, I guess, take steps to make sure that their parents who are now growing older, particularly as they pass into the 70s and 80s, for example, what kinds of things should they be doing, and what kinds of things that they should be looking out for not to do?
Number one, don't walk in and say, "Okay, give me the keys." That is, imagine that someone said to you, "Oh, you have no cell service here, and you have no internet," and you're freaking out because you're like, "But how am I going to call, and how am I going to get online, and how am I going to function?" That's the same thing those keys mean to an older person. You have taken away their connection to the outside world. They're going to be like a petulant teenager. "No, you're not taking my car, and you're not taking my keys." In my personal case, my mother is on a driving diet. She does not drive at night. She does not drive on weekends when the tourists are in town. She doesn't drive if it's raining or snowing. And she makes short trips. She's limited the distance that she will drive. And I'm comfortable with that because I think my mother's a very good driver, but we don't react the way we did when we were younger, and I'm including me in this.
Sure.
Partners in Care also has a driver class where we retrain our drivers. We work with AARP. And the other thing you don't do is say you're going to go to a nursing home. There are various step downs that you can do. I would contact my local health department. This is the do. Find out if they have an ARES division, which is a senior division. AERS is the acronym. And they will come to your parents' home with your parents' permission and do a safety check. Let's see you climb the stairs. And they can kind of discern what, maybe they say, "You know what, you need lever door handles." They'll check, then you need to bring someone in to check, say for example, the temperature of your water heater, because a lot of older people get scalded. They get in the tub, it's too hot, and they don't have the mobility to get out. So you have to check those sorts of things. Besides the health department, I would contact a certified aging in place remodeler. They are here on Delmarva. They are certified through the National Association of Home Builders. They can come in and install a shower seat. They can widen doorways. They can increase the lumens so that they have better vision with better light. They can check the water heater for you, things like that. So the ARES division, the senior division of your health department, and the aging in place remodeler. Now, then there are step downs. If mom's just shouldn't be in that big house anymore by herself, or dad, there are not public, but there are senior apartments that have, for example, there's one in Easton Parkview. They have a locked door, and you have to phone the person to get them to unlock the door to let you in. So it's secure from that aspect. And there are pull chains in the bathroom and the bedroom that alert fire and medical people if they have an issue. They have 24-hour maintenance, and that's a good step down from the house or the condo or whatever, the apartment, to a senior apartment. And then from there, you can start looking into assisted living. And that's another thing about Partners in Care. If you're going to go into assisted living, you're looking at about $8,000 a month. The average income, or rather the average Social Security check in this country, is $1,095 a month. And on the Eastern Shore, most of the ones I've seen are right around $500 or $600 a month. So where are you going to get the money to go into assisted living? Partners in Care can perform these minor things like taking you to the doctors and the grocery store. We do senior advocacy. We make minor home repairs, such as putting in handrails, making sure that the door's locked. We had one lady who was putting up a sticky kitchen window and broke 2 vertebrae in her neck. Spent months in the hospital when she could have called us. We brought some WD-40. We could have fixed it. So there's the aspect of the safety aspect and the health and well-being and having them socialize with other people. And mom and dad rattling around in a big old house by themselves, maybe nobody's checking on them. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Or did I get off base there?
No. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, so one of the questions, I guess, is that how do you persuade an older person that they need to do the step down? You may not be, say, going into assisted living, but maybe they need to get out of the big house and move into a smaller house, because to me, that's a sense of recognition that something dramatic has changed. And as the older you get, as I understand it, and I think I do more and more every day, that change, particularly dramatic change, is something you don't handle as well as, say, for instance, if you were in your 20s. So, I mean, how do you coax somebody? So you're not saying, I'm going to take the keys away, but what do you do? I mean, what's the approach, you think?
Well, I can give you an example.
Sure.
I had a lady who had moved from Baltimore to St. Michael's and was living in a nice house, and her husband, for several years, and her husband passed away. So she moved to a condo, and she had neighbors close by and an older child close by. And she called me. She said, my kids want me to go into a nursing home, and I don't want to do it. And I said, well, let's try this. Let's give it a try. Let's see how it works. And after 2 years, she called me in one day and said, it's time. She said, I just know now that it's time. So she had a chance to think about it that way. But the other thing is I have said to adults, you've spent your life taking care of other people. Why don't you let someone take care of you? And when I say to them, we've had a lovely relationship here, but we call it aging out of the program. And our volunteers are concerned that you're falling, and we cannot pick you up if you fall. We have to call 911. And the volunteers are concerned about you. Your children are concerned about you. Why don't you let someone take care of you for a change? So it's difficult. Everybody that's different. There's a book called What to Do When Someone You Love Needs to Go to Nursing Care. Get your hands on literature, do research on the internet. I've got a great uncle now who is 91, who falls about 3 times a week, has 7 children, and will not let any of them help him. He's there by himself.
So what do you do about that? I mean, how do you obviously you're having a tough time reaching out to him. And what can one do?
Well, ultimately, if you think that person is a danger to themselves or others, you can contact Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services don't need permission from your parent to go into their home. So if your parent has dementia, for example, and you're concerned they're going to catch the house on fire, or that they're not eating, or they're not taking their meds properly, you can get Adult Protective Services involved. They have to determine whether or not this person is a danger. You need to get him to the doctor. A gentleman recently took a memory test, and out of 40 possible answers, he got 6 right. That's an indication to Adult Protective Services that this man needs an intervention. So it's tough. It's tough. I mean, inside every older person is a young person screaming, what the heck happened?
Right.
So it's tough.
How big of a role does the financial end of this play in terms of people retiring? I was talking to somebody, in fact, there's going to be some kind of CPA who's coming in, I think, next week on the peninsula, talking about retirement, people not having enough money, probably perhaps putting their money in the wrong place so they get taxed and so on. How significant is that financial component? And as you talk to people, how well prepared are they, do you think?
Well, since Partners in Care does not base membership on income, I pulled up to a big, beautiful brick house with the dock that went to Europe and the impeccably manicured lawn, and inside is the dining room table for 30 people with the silver candelabras, and I'm thinking, why is this lady calling me? I mean, I know she has macular degeneration, and she can't see to drive. But she said, well, at the end of the interview, she said, I'm the second wife. And when my husband passed away, he left the property to his son by a previous marriage. And I have no children. And so I have a life estate and I can live here, but my stepson gives me an allowance. And he's decided $18 a month is too much for cab fare. So she may look like she's sitting on top of the world. I have another woman who's the widow of a retired military officer. She said, I have some money, but I don't know if I'm going to outlive it or not. So I'm trying to stretch it out as long as I can. A lot of the people that we serve at Partners in Care fall in this little crack where they make a few dollars too much to pay for services and yet not enough to qualify for government services or whatever. So they fall in that crack. But in the 1970s, our government switched the focus away from older people to start giving money to and programs for younger people. So what has happened is we have a whole generation of younger people who are now maturing and who feel entitled, whereas the people that were, the older people that didn't come along in that entitlement don't know how to ask, they don't want to ask, they don't know who to ask. So I see the financial end of things is, I took a woman to your Doc's Inn. She obviously had food poisoning, and we pretty much knew it was food poisoning because at the end of the week, the same can of food she was eating, she shared with a cat, and the cat got sick. And this young doctor shook his finger in her face and said, you should not be eating old food like that. After a couple of days, you need to throw it away. I said, excuse me, Mr. Young Doctor. She can't stop off and pick up food on the way home. She gets out once a week or once a month when her Social Security check comes in. So, yes, financial things. They can't afford transportation. They have to watch their pennies at the grocery store. They can shop once a month usually if they don't have other avenues. It's tough.
We've been speaking with Pam OBrien. She's with Partners in Care about aging on the shore, and a great program, sort of neighbor helping neighbor, which is a really interesting concept. And we appreciate you taking time to stop by and talk with us. You've been listening to Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit PAC14.org.